Late at night on June 22, 1943, a German bomber breaking the front lines appeared in the Soviet rear. It took 2 seconds to land an agent. In the morning, a young infantry officer appeared at regimental headquarters. He introduced himself as Captain Rayevsky and demanded they take him to counterintelligence.
Mayor cried, "Caught you, punk. There, what's your mission?" I said, "I'm only to speak at the head office in Moscow."
The most famous Smersh operation began against Abwehr. The German specials prepared thoroughly. In late 1930s, with a plentiful staff, both in Germany and abroad, Abwehr began to collect information. Regular flights of a special appointment squadron, Rovel, flew over the Soviet Union and would provide information about the troops, the airports, and fortifications. Abwehr equipped radio intercept stations and redoubled the intelligence efforts. Moreover, on the eve of the war, injection of sabotage in intelligence units into the USSR had begun.
A worthy opponent, I should say. Admiral Canaris was in charge, a high pro, started from the grassroots. He carried out intelligence and operational work.
Having taken office on January 1st, 1934, Captain First Rank, later the Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, bore personal responsibility for the German intelligence and counter-espionage during the Blitzkrieg preparations.
There were the special units, such as Regiment of Brandenburg 800, composed of professional saboteurs. In the first weeks of war, it made successful strategic and tactical missions of capture of different objects, bridges, ferries, economic objects, to destroy communications, etc.
The special regiment Brandenburg 800, created by Theodor von Hippel, was to carry out subversive and assault missions. Soldiers were thoroughly trained, for, on Abwehr's instructions, they were taking over strategic objectives in the Soviet rear, holding them until main body troops arrived. Reconnoitering at the front, assassinating commanders of the Red Army and local party bosses.
I have to say we happened to be not ready to fight the subversive mobile groups. In numbers, landed in our rear. Defense, combat.
When the Blitzkrieg failed, the German secret services changed secret war tactics, realizing that there's no point relying on themselves only. Abwehr builds a network of training camps for agents, adept for deep rear landings. It was then propaganda intensified at the front, and special propaganda units began to work.
They called through loudspeakers to desert to the enemy, in Russian. By then, they had the traitors used widely. Leaflets as a kind of a pass were spreading. There were peculiar parachuted bombs going off with leaflets. Sometimes such bombs were dropped from airplanes. In the rear, the leaflets read, "For whom are you fighting? Surrender," etc. Soldiers who voluntarily defected to the Wehrmacht were sent to the POW filtration camps. It was there that the Abwehr basically recruited students for spy school.
Харчей не давали неделю. Мерли, конечно, а тех, кто выжил... Тех, кто выжил. Подходящих. Брали, кто в тюрьме побывал. Угу. Куда брали? Куда? В школу. В какую? В ихнюю. Наверное, Сатурн. По-видимому, Сатурн.
Это что-то новое?
Уже не новая. Звезда.
Кодовое название?
Угу.
Абвер, СД?
Абвер. Тех, что забрасывает в Москву, посылает Сатурн. А на других фронтах Марс, Меркур, Орион. Небо и то заморались, сволочь.
The front sweepingly rolled eastward. Entire armies got encircled, mostly giving up or perishing. Still, there happened to those who, in spite of fear, could make a tough decision, like Alexander Kozlov. A young lieutenant caught in the enemy's rear created a partisan detachment on his own.
My partisan detachment was big, 300 people in number. We fought German punitive detachments, attacked garrisons.
He was a rare kind, able to subdue certain circumstances. In 1967, when the film came out, The Road to Saturn, the audiences admired a hero, Sergei Krylov, planted into the Abwehr spy school. Nobody knew that the life was modeled after a real person. Smersh agent Alexander Kozlov turned out to be far more dramatic than the screen story. Throughout the war, he risked not only his life, but also his beloved woman's. They met in the partisan unit, courier agent Galina Vilkova and Lieutenant Alexander Kozlov.
I liked her at first sight. Well, she was beautiful too. Can't tell. I fell in right away.
The lovers got married and were really happy, although any moment the war might separate them. Attacks against the enemy followed permanently. Action operations kept going. Well-organized, supported by local people, and armed by the center, partisan detachments became serious threats to the fascists. To combat them, Abwehr had to create a special HQ, Sonder R.
The Germans would practice such activities as false partisan detachments, communicating with those real ones, to destroy the latter, moreover, for provocation's sake. False partisans would win over local patriots, also to destroy them during punitive actions. Entire villages were burned for helping guerrillas.
Such a punitive action against the Smolensk guerrillas had begun in June of 1942.
There was an order from Moscow to move 2 hours in small groups. We would move at night and hide in the swamps in the daytime. At times, our faces were bitten by mosquitoes, so we could not tell one another.
By this time, Galia had been pregnant for 4 months. She often complained of sickness. Even said, "Sasha, shoot me up." We were slowing down.
Once we got to the clearing, now guess what? From the opposite, Russians appeared. We were glad. Kozlov said, "They're ours." As we went ahead, it dawned upon us they were policemen in disguise.
Captives were brought to the camp. Galina was sent to a women's barracks. Kozlov into the lockup. As a partisan commander, he faced imminent execution, but he was miraculously saved. The desperate woman admitted to her barrack friends that her husband was in the camp.
Well then, she cried, looking from the window.
Not
remembering conspiracy, she told them all. There were German noses everywhere, reporting to the authorities.
Abwehr got interested in Kozlov. He was taken for unexpected interrogation.
What do you know of art and literature?
I
said I was a chess player. I was a district champion. He said chess was good. He also loved to play chess. I beat him. He played well, but worse than me. Well, he looked upset, then suggested to return match.
The Germans were looking at this prisoner closely. Kozlov seemed perfect for the service, smart, self-controlled. Being in a fix, he was able to make the right decision. Then the Oberlieutenant made the correct move.
I'm from the German specials. I suggest you cooperate. It'll be the following. If you agree, I will send you to our spy school for a training course. Then you'll be landed in the rear of the Red Army with the intelligence mission. I mean intelligence, not diversion. Sharp, at this time tomorrow, you must say yes or no. The response should be a word, short as a shot, yes or no. No explanation required.
In the evening, he was allowed to meet Galina, supposing it would be easier for a pregnant woman to persuade her husband to accept the offer of cooperation.
Tough decision. To accept is to betray motherland. Yet no one wants to die. Then I got an idea. Why not to agree? To get away somehow.
He says, cool. You don't need to work for them at all. No way. I swear to officers' honor on that. Don't mess with me too. You'll be watched. You'll have to meet people pretending to be patriots. Don't believe anybody. Never.
Smersh means death for spies. In the middle of the war, the fight against Abwehr came to a head. In March 1943, at Lubyanka, First Deputy of Internal Affairs Commissar Merkelov holds an urgent meeting of the commanders of fronts and armies. On the agenda, there is a question of reorganization of the military counterintelligence. It was decided to give a special name to a new department of the Commissariat of Defense. Somebody suggested an acronym after the popular slogan, Death for the German Spies, Smersh. But Stalin remarked, why is it only about German spies? Are not other intelligences doing this against us? So let it be simple that, Death for Spies, abbreviated Smersh. Viktor Abakumov led the military counterintelligence service.
Абакумов, став руководителем Главного управления контрразведки СМЕРШ,
as head of the Smersh, Abakumov came under Stalin's command only, reporting to him personally.
People for Smersh were chosen very carefully. Experienced soldiers and cadets of military academies. They had to be able to tell false documents by guesswork only, to be tactically a step ahead of the enemy as experienced psychologists, spotting German agents and hidden traitors.
They were to protect troops from penetration of foreign intelligence. In other words, the spies who were getting into our territory.
However, the toughest challenge for Smersh was to train agents beyond the front for planting into German intelligence.
The most preferable were those who had been beyond the front. Those who escaped encirclement, wandering for months, knew the situation in occupation regime, how to permeate through pickets, how to keep low profile in populated areas, or either. It was people that survived. They already had some experience, some acumen to survive in such an environment. Therefore, such people will be preferred.
Abwehr is defense, combat. Spy School 103 of the Abwehr Command with radio sign Saturn, to which Alexander Kozlov was sent, was situated in Katyn near Smolensk. The cottages, dakas of the party leaders were suitable enough for training quarters and officers' comfortable living. It was one of the best Abwehr schools. Experienced coaches, well-set training courses, perfect discipline, perfect conspiracy. At school, Kozlov got the name Menshikov.
Once I was summoned to the director's office, and he congratulated me. Congratulations, you have a son. Well, we crooked the elbow.
The joy was premature. 3 days later, he was told his son died, though doctors tried their best to save the newborn's life.
He was very weak. Mom hardly survived pregnancy, and he died in 2 to 3 days.
Alexander Kozlov felt desperate about the death of his son. The Germans got worried if he'd suffered a breakdown, this might entail loss of their most talented student.
Every Sunday, I was brought to Smolensk to Galia. Doing this, they were hoping to keep up my love for Galia. And to be sure, I, being sent to the rear of the Red Army, would always come back.
Soon, Alexander Kozlov's H-hour had come. He was given the documents in the name of Captain Raevsky. Landing time had been set. The mission was simple: to get to Malakovka, to deliver money and batteries for transmitters for the German agents.
Before dispatch, he was allowed to meet me.
The meeting was sad, and the farewell was short, but understood this date may be the last. He was going in the dark, and she had to wait patiently, playing a dramatic hostage's role until the end. On the night of June 22, 1943, the German plane headed for the front line and beyond. A few hours later, Captain Raevsky, also Alexander Menshikov, also Alexander Kozlov, safely landed in the Soviet rear.
Taking out a gun, I had a clip out and left it in the woods. If I would be caught, I should say I came with good intentions. I walked into the meadow. 3 soldiers having a smoke. I greeted them. Hey, soldiers. They responded, yes, sir. See me to your commander.
Alexander Kozlov well understood that only Smersh could do this destiny well. He demanded a meeting with security to give himself up and be sent to Moscow.
The center would appreciate only those agents that had been trained in Abwehr special schools, knew the staff and training methods. Such agents would be regarded as prospective, providing his consent for recruiting. By his assistance, it could be possible to start a radio game or send him back as a double agent, communicating with him somehow to get information.
Alexander Kozlov's frank story of how he happened to be in spy school gained confidence of the special agents. Moreover, a month earlier, the NKVD got an album of a clerk of the school's office, the former POW Dmitry Shinkarenko.
Being in the camp, Shinkarenko had interested the Germans by his calligraphy skills. He was moved to Abwehr school, where he worked not as an agent, but as a clerk and a draftsman producing documents for agents going beyond the front line.
His humble clerk job, Shinkarenko did it properly. Meanwhile, without raising any suspicion, he also was copying all documents passed through his hands, meticulously collecting dossiers on all cadets. Then, as soon as he could, he fled with this valuable album to the partisans.
The content of this album was of great interest for the security service. For that, Shinkarenko was relieved from any criminal responsibility. The case, instituted for treason, was immediately nixed, and himself was released.
After Shinkarenko's disappearance, his return to Saturn was impossible. Alexander Kozlov's candidacy for being planted into the school had just come in handy.
At the Lubyanka, Alexander Ivanovich, you've made a very big thing. It is a great thing. We seize this opportunity. We will send you back, but this time with our own mission.
It was the beginning of the Pathfinder operation, personally approved by Stalin. It was developed by experienced operators. To test Kozlov's loyalty, a trip to Malakovka was organized to meet the German agent, Aromatov, to whom he was to hand over a parcel on Abwehr's instructions.
I was escorted by a mayor, as if we happened to be fellow travelers. I was being watched all the time. In case the patrols checked me, he'd say, "He's ours, do not disturb." I found the street, gave the word. He said, "Come in, nice to see you." We ran out of money. I say, "These are $500,000. There, the rest of it." Here, documents, various forms, and batteries for the transmitter. That's it, I'm going. He said, "Let's have a drink." I said, "No." The agent in Malakhovka, to whom Kozlov ought to come as a messenger, had been arrested some time ago by the security service, and as a double agent of the radio game, was working for the Soviets.
However, neither Kozlov nor the radio operator knew the truth. Both played up their legends excellently. Only after that, Smersh begins preparation for Alexander Kozlov's landing in the German rear.
The area designated free of minefields. No sense to send an agent to have him blow it up. An officer of special department that was working in a certain battalion was involved. A commander of scouts was present with a small covering party.
On June 17, 1943, a new agent had been received at Lubyanka, nicknamed Pathfinder, and successfully passed the front line.
I waited a bit, then started to scout. That is, I am a German agent, do not shoot, several times running. Then they call, "Russian, come." Then I was taken by two soldiers and led by the hand to the trench. I had reported and got welcome too. The German command awarded me with the Silver Medal of Valor and appointed me coach of the school.
в русской армии. Прошу.
Pathfinder began to operate. He had to remain in Saturn School as long as possible. Moscow was awaiting his detailed information about all agents trained for the landing in the Soviet rear. Pathfinder had to provide the connection with the center on his own. He had to take risks as well to make double agents of the cadets.
It was the most difficult point in my work as an agent. Now I'm promoted to the German captain. I am the head of the studies. That is, the second person in school. Say, there's a candidate for recruiting. As we meet, I tell him that I am a Soviet intelligence officer. How's that? He nearly passed out. How come? That may be a provocation. If it's a setup, he'll be hanged. Becoming a double agent, he stays in school for a while. It takes time to get on. We examine each other. What if he told on me, and the Germans are ready to get me? Sooner or later, this work of recruiting cadets would lead Kozlov to a sad end. One cannot always balance on a razor's blade and survive. Sooner or later, one stumbles upon the provocateur and gets unmasked.
It was like walking in a minefield. One wrong word or move entails imminent death. It's been 2 years. Only through his incredible intuition, Kozlov never made any mistakes recruiting his 7 cadets. 6 of them succeeded in conveying the information on more than 100 Abwehr students.
Any information on the Abwehr or other German specials would help an operator's job. Numbers of albums of the wanted were issued and distributed to the security, presenting a photo of an agent, or his description, his looks, characteristics, etc.
By such orientation, Smersh caught enemy agents. The special agents caught spies right after the landing. Radio operators recruited by Kozlov, willing to cooperate, participated in radio games.
During the war, the security carried out 184 radio games against the enemy. Radio game is considered aerobatics of counterintelligence. It expects skills of making a radio channel to the enemy, so he never suspects it's a radio game. And he's provided with misinformation. Of course, it also expects immense self-control and knowledge. That's why the art of radio games is so highly valued among pros.
Русская разведка нас переиграла. Переиграть фон Клея. Как они смогли? Наверное, мы никогда не узнаем, как они это сделали. Почему же? Может, и узнаем.
No clowns for 2 years. Alexander Kozlov, smart and lucky, made an outstanding career in Saturn, being honored with the Iron Cross for merit for the Reich, the award equal to a Soviet order. Besides 4 medals for honorable service, it was more than a year to the end of the war. On February 14th, 1944, Hitler, furious over failures of the intelligence services, disbanded Abwehr. Admiral Canaris's fate proved to be unenviable. He was hanged in the camp. Saturn was moved beyond the Elbe and settled in Bismarck. In April of 1945, the town was occupied by U.S. forces. The staff of the school had fled.
I didn't have to escape. They were our friends. It did matter.
Only a year later, Moscow would hear of him. This was the end of the film, The Road to Saturn. But real life kept going. It seemed he was over the worst and due for his just rewards and family happiness. Yet the post-war drama just started. With no clear directions, Pathfinder, together with all German officers, surrendered to the Americans. Galina remained in the city.
The Russians used to come to the embassy. They wore Soviet uniform. I think I have to tell them to stop them and tell. I think, I'm not ready. Maybe next time.
Waiting for dispatch to the Soviet sector, Vilkova didn't sit on her hands. She collected documents, which the Germans left in the Saturn.
I kept preparing photos, documents, some letters. In my suitcase, I made a false bottom. I also got some clothes in case of me to change. When the Americans handed us over to the Soviets, they stripped each woman naked.
На нашу сторону передавали, они каждую женщину раздевали догола. Но в мой чемодан никто не посмотрел. И таким образом я, значит, прошла незамеченной к нам.
Once in the camp near Paris, Kozlov made a risky move. He called in the aid of an American officer.
Я придумал себе легенду.
I told him an invented legend that I was a Soviet agent. And a month ago, a group of 3 men wearing German uniforms with German IDs had been landed on the west bank of the Oder to find out about the German defense. However, because of the Soviet offensive and German retreat, we lost each other. I had been captured as a German officer. So I asked him, as an Allied officer, to give me the opportunity to meet with my command.
Instinct didn't betray the war dog. Allies brought Pathfinder to the Soviet military mission. I think it's over. At last, I survived. Yet it was far from it. After 3 months of thorough checks, Kozlov was moved to Moscow. The Lubyanka took him coldly.
There were suspicions he may be enlisted by the Americans, for they showed interest in the former German specials after the war, far and away. It must be understood that after 1947, the Americans became our main adversary.
Yet the first few days after returning turned out to be the happiest of his life. He met Galina. They started building plans for the future. Who could imagine that now, when the war was over, Alexander Kozlov once again was in a deadly fix?
Жили они в Малой Малаховке. Он писал подробный отчет. И тут-то пригодились вот эти документы, которые мама привезла в своем чемоданчике. После того, как они написали, он написал подробный отчет, им сказали, что ни в коем случае никому, там, ни матери, ни брату, ни сестре, никому, чтобы никто не знал, где они находились. Они должны были молчать.
After all he did for the motherland, it would have been just the time for his promotion. As a pro, he never regarded himself out of the army. After 2 years in Saturn, he was made a very experienced agent. There are very few agents like Pathfinder in Smersh.
Что же делать со мной?
The command has no idea what to do with me. They say, you're going to be demobilized. I say, no way. I do not have any civil profession. I am a military man. Let me go on. To remain in the army, I am ready for any officer's post. Don't sack me, please.
Now the dreams of a military career dashed, young and strong officer had been sent to the reserve. Instead of awards and titles, Alexander Kozlov got a reference that during the war he was in German captivity. It was nothing but the wolf ticket, depriving him of a decent life for good. Professional agent Pathfinder had to return to his home village, Alexandrovsko. However, security services still were in need of him. This time, he had to be a secret identifier, that is, a helper in searching for war criminals.
In fact, all former German agents that had been turned into double agents, they all were used as identifiers. As soon as somewhere in a region a certain person aroused suspicion that he might be a former Abwehr cadet, whether his photo would immediately be sent to the local NKVD, or Kozlov would be brought to the residence of the man to make identification himself. Such research work lasted long enough.
All this time, Kozlov had to keep quiet about his past. Spotted by German captivity, he could not find any decent work or habitation. The family had to live in an abandoned barracks with rats. Soon a son was born. Even compared with post-war devastation, Kozlov's situation seemed desperate. The poverty, along with the scorned looks of home folk, were unbearable. Besides, the child grew seriously ill. The memory of the death of the firstborn was fresh. For fear, Galina fled to her mother.
He said, it's up to you. He had no idea. He was desperate.
That move appeared to be Galina's fatal mistake, irreparable as well. Kozlov lost his nerve. Never had he had suicidal thoughts, be it in the camp or breaking through, and now for the first time he did not want to live.
I was left all alone. I thought of suicide. To have me hanged, well, I was at a loss, unable to think clearly. Had I had a gun, I'd have shot myself. Then I met Maya.
Maya was the first beauty of the village. She took him in with all of his problems. Kozlov had cheered up. Controlling himself, he tried to find a job.
As a military school instructor, I went to the military commissar. He said, Sasha, I can't give you the appointment as you were in captivity. It's forbidden for men like you, well, conditions that he won't tell anybody, but he did. Thus, it came to the NKVD.
On June 1st, 1949, Alexander Kozlov was persecuted for the disclosure and sentenced to imprisonment for 3 years by the decision of a special council of the Ministry of State Security.
Я это знала, он мне писал, я ему даже посылки писала туда.
I would even send parcels there. Food and smoke I would send to him, not because I wanted him back to me, but out of human sympathy. I regarded him as falsely accused, hoping of his rehabilitation. It was an unjust case.
All of his camp years, Kozlov missed his wife and son. Resentment had gone. He remembered only the good. Alexander could not understand how on earth, after so many trials, they had to part so easily. Once released, he went to Galina. The welcome was all but warm. She could not forgive his infidelity.
Rather unfondly, I had to be jealous, thinking we had nothing in common except for the awful war years. And there was nothing left for us in the future. So I gave him the bird.
He'll never return to her again. Back in the war, they understood each other at once, unlike in the quiet life. Later, Alexander said, "We destroyed our happiness with our own hands." They would feel the pain of the separation until death. In the early 60s, it was decided to take Pathfinder off the security list. Out of the blue, Alexander Kozlov became glorified. He was invited to Moscow and was told of the book that would be written about him.
Once I went to the station to buy a newspaper and saw my portrait in a story. The advertising read of Alexander Kozlov making his way to the German security with a secret mission. Now, Alexander Ivanovich returned home, being busy with peaceful and creative work. The village was all astir. Some say it's him, and others no. People would put for a wager a box of vodka.
One would say justice prevailed. Now those who had despised him for 20 years were imposing their friendship. Hero Agent was welcomed to meetings at schools and by veterans. Above all, his heroism became a screen story. Alas, too much has been destroyed. Forever, a career and personal life. His life appeared to be awry. Galina wrote in her last diary,
"We lived a double life, one of our own, other of a legend, though for a double life, there were one heart and one bottom. The war had disfigured my life, entirely unprotected, balancing on the edge, but could not ruin it."
After 3 years of its existence, Smersh has remained in history as one of the most effective and legendary secret services. Even now, we don't know the price of success. Dozens of names of agents remaining unknown. Until the early 90s, many names remained classified. On Victory Day, they could not, like other veterans, show their medals, drink 100 grams with fellow soldiers. They remained single, obliged to carry the weight of their profession all alone. It was the last interview with Alexander Kozlov. He died in September of 2008. 4 months after the Victory Day, Galina Velikova died.